I own a lake cabin that's been in my family for years. It's not huge, but it's peaceful, private, and far enough out that I can disconnect from everything. It's where I go to unwind on weekends, away from the noise of work and everyday life. It sits near a community that has a homeowners association, but technically, my property line is just outside their jurisdiction. Still, I get along with most of the neighbors. I don't attend HOA meetings. I don't vote. I just mind my own business. A few weeks ago, the HOA president, let's call her Karen, came by while I was cleaning up the porch. Karen is the type of person who introduces herself with her title. "Hi, I'm the HOA president." She didn't ask if I had time to talk, she just launched into her pitch. Apparently, her relatives were flying in for the weekend, and she wanted to throw them a surprise birthday party. So far, nothing unusual. Then she asked to use my cabin for the party. At first, I thought I'd misheard her. She repeated herself like it was no big deal. "Just a few hours," she said. "We'll be gone by sundown. I'll make sure everything's cleaned up." I asked why she couldn't just host it at her own place, or the community center. Her answer? "My house is too small. And the clubhouse is booked." Then she smiled and added, "Besides, your cabin has the best view of the lake." I told her no. Politely, but clearly. I said I don't lend out my place, not even to family, and I wasn't comfortable letting strangers into my cabin. She stared at me like I'd just insulted her ancestors. "It's just one party," she said. "We're neighbors." I reiterated that it wasn't personal, just my policy. She let out this fake laugh and muttered something about how I must really value my privacy. I thought that was the end of it. 2 days later, I got an email from the HOA mailing list. Karen had sent out a newsletter update, and right in the middle of it was a passive-aggressive note about some members of the community refusing to support neighborhood unity. No names, but it was clear who she meant. Then the calls started. Not angry ones, just confused neighbors asking if I'd really backed out of hosting the party. Apparently, Karen had told people I'd agreed, and then changed my mind at the last minute. She made it sound like I was being difficult just for fun. I corrected them and explained that I had never agreed in the first place. Most people accepted that, but a few were clearly uncomfortable. One even said, "Well, she said it was important for her family. Maybe you could just reconsider?" That's when I knew this wasn't going to blow over. A week before the party, I got a letter in the mail, official HOA letterhead, signed by Karen. It said I was in violation of the Community Event Support Clause, and was expected to participate in HOA-led initiatives to promote cohesion. I almost laughed. My property wasn't even inside the HOA. I double-checked, then called a friend who works in real estate law just to be sure. He confirmed it. They have no legal authority over my cabin. So I drafted a reply with copies of my deed and boundary map, and I sent it to her. I said in writing that she had no jurisdiction and no permission to access or use my property. The response I got was an emotional email saying I was choosing isolation over connection, and that her relatives were already looking forward to the party. That's when she crossed the line. She told neighbors the party was still happening, at my place. She began referring to it as the Lakeside Gathering, and said it would be an unforgettable surprise. People started RSVPing. I even overheard someone talking about bringing a karaoke machine. At this point, I stopped being polite. I printed out large signs that said, "Private property, no trespassing, cameras active." I installed a second deadbolt. I informed a few trusted neighbors about what was going on and told them, flat out, that if anyone tried to enter my cabin, I would treat it as trespassing. Karen's next move? She held an emergency HOA meeting and tried to pass a motion to extend boundary recognition to include my lot. She argued that since I was adjacent and benefiting from community infrastructure, I should fall under HOA rules. That motion failed. But that didn't stop her from continuing to plan the party, at my cabin, without permission. At that point, I wasn't sure what her endgame was. Did she really think I'd back down last minute? Or was she planning to just show up and hope I wasn't there? Either way, I knew I had to be at the cabin when it happened. So I cleared my schedule, loaded up the car, and drove out early on the day of the so-called part. I arrived at the cabin before 8 a.m. and made sure everything was locked and secured. The signs were still posted. Nothing had been touched, yet. I brought some food, settled in, and waited. Around mid-morning, I started getting texts from a neighbor I trusted. He said Karen had just sent out a reminder email about the lakefront celebration, telling people to arrive by noon and bring folding chairs. She even claimed I'd offered to step out for the day to give them space. That was a lie. An hour later, I got a knock on the door. It wasn't Karen, just one of the neighbors, a guy I barely knew. He looked surprised to see me home. He said, "Oh, Karen said you'd be out. She told us to just let ourselves in." I told him the truth. No one had permission to be here. He nodded awkwardly and left. Then, just after noon, the cars started showing up. A couple of SUVs parked on the gravel path near the water. Then more. I counted at least 4 vehicles, with around a dozen people total. Most of them looked confused, carrying gifts and coolers, clearly expecting some kind of party. Karen stepped out of the lead car like she was walking into a wedding reception. She was dressed up, carrying a clipboard, and barking directions. I stayed inside and watched. She walked right up to the front porch and tried the doorknob. Locked, obviously. That's when she started knocking hard, then pounding. "Hello? You said you wouldn't be here. Open the door." I didn't respond. After a minute of shouting, she turned to the group and announced, "Sorry, he must have changed his mind again." Typical. Then she pulled out her phone and started calling me. I ignored it. She tried again. Then again. Then she left a voicemail. I played it on speaker. "You're being ridiculous. Everyone is here. They flew in. Do you understand how selfish this is? I already told them you agreed." 5 minutes passed. Then she tried the door again, more forcefully. When that didn't work, she walked around the back. I moved to the back door and stood silently. I heard her jiggle the handle, then knock again, louder. "If you don't open this, I'm calling the HOA board. This is community property." That was the last straw. I opened the blinds just enough for her to see me. She stepped back like I'd slapped her. Her face twisted. "So you're just going to sit there while everyone stands outside? You're ruining everything." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She stomped back to the front and stood on the porch, arms crossed. Then she yelled to the group. "Well, he's refusing to open up. Some people just don't care about anyone but themselves." Most of the guests were clearly uncomfortable now. One woman came up to her and whispered something. Karen snapped back loud enough for me to hear. "He promised. He said it was fine. I've been planning this for weeks." Then the shouting started. She screamed that I was a liar, that I was antisocial, that I was trying to sabotage her family gathering. At one point, she claimed I was violating the spirit of the HOA charter, even though she knew perfectly well I wasn't under HOA rule. Then she grabbed one of the porch chairs I'd left out last visit and hurled it into the bushes. That got everyone's attention. Some of her guests started filming. One of them, probably her niece, said, "Is this even legal?" Someone else asked, "Are we trespassing?" You could see the mood shift. The more she yelled, the quieter they got. Then came the cherry on top. She took out a champagne bottle from a cooler and popped it right there on the gravel. She started pouring drinks and handed out plastic cups like the party was still happening. A few people took them awkwardly. Most didn't. She shouted, "Let's not let one bitter man ruin our fun. We came here to celebrate, and we will." That didn't last long. After 10 minutes of awkward standing, people started drifting back to their cars. Some made excuses. Others just walked away. Karen stood there seething, watching them go. Finally, only she and one other person remained. Then she walked up to my window, got right in front of it and said, "You think this is over? You embarrassed me in front of my family. I will make sure everyone knows what kind of man you are." Then she spit on the gravel and stormed off. They drove off a few minutes later. I stayed inside the whole time. About an hour after she left, I got a text from another neighbor. It was a video, Karen on my porch, yelling, with her voice cracking and face bright red. The caption said, "This is your HOA president." Another message came in. Then another. Videos were spreading. People were asking questions. I didn't reply to any of them. I didn't have to. Her meltdown was already working against her, and I knew it wasn't over yet. I didn't say a word to anyone for the next 24 hours. I didn't respond to texts or emails. I stayed at the cabin, cleaned up the porch, packed up my things, and headed home. But by the time I got back, the fallout had already started. Karen's public meltdown was circulating fast. The video had been posted to a local neighborhood Facebook group by one of her own guests. Then it got picked up on Reddit, specifically, a subreddit dedicated to HOA nightmares. Comments poured in. Most people were shocked by how entitled she acted. Others were saying it was peak Karen behavior. By the next morning, 3 different neighbors had reached out to me privately to apologize. One said, "I had no idea she lied to us." Another admitted they felt pressured into attending and left the moment they realized I hadn't agreed. A third sent me a screenshot of a group chat where someone said, "That cabin guy had every right to shut her down." Karen, on the other hand, went silent. No emails. No statements. No apologies. But the damage was done. Later that week, the HOA held its regular board meeting. I didn't attend, but a neighbor filled me in. Apparently, people were angry. Not just about the party fiasco, but about the fact that Karen used HOA resources to push a personal event. She'd sent emails using the official list. She'd printed flyers and used HOA money for community materials. When questioned, she claimed it was within her discretion. Someone stood up and asked the board to vote on limiting presidential powers. Another person brought up a motion to call a special election for a new president. The board didn't make a final decision that night, but they didn't defend her either. Karen reportedly left the meeting early. Meanwhile, I was preparing something of my own. I hadn't planned to get lawyers involved, but I didn't want this escalating again. So I had my real estate attorney draft a formal cease and desist letter. It included a copy of my property's legal description and a very clear statement. My land is privately owned, not under the HOA, and any future attempts to assert control would be considered harassment. I mailed it directly to Karen and copied the HOA board. Within 2 days, I got a short email from the board. It said, "Thank you for the clarification. We acknowledge that your property is not subject to HOA jurisdiction and regret any confusion caused." No apology from Karen. No retraction. But I wasn't surprised. Then came the twist. One of the guests at the party, Karen's cousin, I think, posted their own account on social media. They described what happened from their side, saying they had flown in expecting a formal event. Karen had told them she secured a lakefront venue, and never mentioned that it wasn't hers to use. They said, "We were mortified. We left early. This wasn't a surprise party. It was a disaster." That post got shared, too. More comments. More eyes on what happened. Eventually, the videos made their way to a couple of commentary channels on YouTube. One even included screenshots of the HOA emails and Karen's meltdown. The footage wasn't flattering. The comments were brutal. By this point, Karen must have realized the hole she'd dug. But instead of owning up to anything, she tried a new angle. She sent me a handwritten note. It wasn't an apology. It was more like damage control. She wrote, "I realize there were misunderstandings, and I would like to move forward in a positive way. Let's put this behind us. I'd like to invite you to our next HOA potluck so we can clear the air." I didn't respond. The following week, I heard from another neighbor that Karen wouldn't be running for re-election. Whether she was pressured or just tired of the backlash, I don't know. But she stepped down quietly before the next vote. A few months later, the HOA elected a new president, someone reasonable, calm, and uninterested in throwing surprise parties on private land. As for the cabin, I installed new motion lights and replaced the locks. I haven't had a single issue since. I still go out there often, usually alone, sometimes with a friend or two. And every time I sit on that porch, I think about how wild it is that one simple no led to such chaos. But I don't regret anything. Karen thought she could guilt, manipulate, and pressure her way into getting what she wanted. She assumed no one would stand up to her. That I'd just give in to avoid the noise. She was wrong. And when you have the facts, the boundaries, and the patience to let entitled people show themselves, sometimes you don't have to say much at all. They do all the talking for you. It's been several months since everything went down, and the neighborhood has mostly moved on, but the story still comes up from time to time. New residents hear about the cabin incident, and eventually connect the dots. I don't bring it up, but I don't deny it either. One unexpected outcome is that I've earned a kind of quiet respect. People who used to avoid eye contact now wave when they pass by. I'm not part of the HOA, but now board members occasionally ask for my input on things that border my property. There's a clear line now, one that everyone understands shouldn't be crossed. Karen disappeared from the public eye. She resigned before the next election, citing personal reasons, and hasn't shown her face at any HOA events since. I heard she's still in the neighborhood but keeps to herself now. A couple of her old supporters distanced themselves pretty quickly once the videos went viral. Turns out, people don't want to be associated with someone who tries to hijack private property for a party. The footage of her outburst kept circulating long after the incident. A few compilation channels picked it up and added dramatic music or text overlays. One video titled, "HOA Karen Gets Owned on Lakefront Property," got over 1 million views. Another one edited her yelling into a fake movie trailer. I didn't upload any of it, but I'll admit, I laughed. Strangers started commenting on the original Reddit thread, thanking me for standing my ground. People from across the country shared their own stories of HOA abuse. Some even messaged me asking how I managed to keep my cabin outside HOA boundaries. It surprised me how common this kind of entitlement is. The difference, I guess, is that I didn't back down. I've had people ask if I plan to take legal action against Karen. The answer is no. I don't need to. The public embarrassment, the backlash, the loss of her status, all of that did more damage than any lawsuit ever could. Besides, I got what I wanted, my privacy, respected boundaries, and no more nonsense from the HOA. After everything, I started spending more time at the cabin. I used to just visit for a weekend here and there, but now I've been putting work into making it even more self-sufficient. Solar panels, rainwater collection, upgraded security. I've made it my personal retreat, a place no one can touch, no matter how loud they get or how many emails they send. What still sticks with me is how confidently she thought she could take control. She believed she had the right to overstep because she was used to people folding. It wasn't even about the party, it was about power. About being told no and refusing to accept it. And in the end, that's what made everything fall apart. There's a lesson buried in all of it, and I think it's this: boundaries don't require permission. You don't have to argue or justify yourself when someone demands access to what's yours. No is enough. And if someone can't respect that, they'll show you who they really are. I never wanted a fight. I didn't go looking for drama. I just wanted to be left alone to enjoy the space my family worked hard to keep. But standing your ground sometimes creates more impact than you expect. You don't have to yell. You don't need revenge. You just hold the line and let people expose themselves. One of my neighbors, someone I barely knew before all this, dropped by a few weeks ago with a beer and a smile. He said, "You know, for a guy who doesn't say much, you really shut that whole thing down." We had a short conversation, nothing deep, but it reminded me that not everyone is easily swayed by titles and tantrums. Some people just need to see someone else stand firm before they do the same. That's probably been the biggest shift. People are quicker to question things now. The new HOA president, someone level-headed and pragmatic, makes decisions more transparently. The board no longer acts like a personal extension of whoever's in charge. And while I still don't attend meetings, I occasionally get updates from others who want to make sure I'm in the loop. Funny how one incident, one entitled demand, can reshape how people interact. All because someone thought community spirit meant, give me what I want. I still get the occasional odd look from newcomers who've only heard the story in pieces, but I don't care. My property is quiet, clean, and respected. That's all I ever asked for. The cabin is still mine, and no one's knocked on my door since. Karen, from what I've heard, spends most of her time indoors now. Someone said she listed her house a while back, but I haven't confirmed it. If she moves, I won't miss her. But I do hope she learns something. Probably not, but maybe. This whole thing started because she wanted a party and didn't know how to hear the word no. It ended with a neighborhood reevaluating who they trust, a leadership shakeup, and her reputation permanently stained. I didn't win by yelling louder. I didn't win by playing her games. I won because I knew where my rights began and where hers ended, and I didn't move the line to make her feel better. Entitled people always think they're unstoppable, until they meet someone who doesn't budge. That's all it takes sometimes. Just one locked door.